Ubisoft was supposed to remake Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, but we all know what happened with that. The only Prince of Persia game I actually played was The Warrior Within. I never beat it as a kid. It was very difficult. Thankfully, these games still live on, and my plan is to go through each and every one of them. So was Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time even a good game? And can someone get away with playing the original version, seeing as the remake is now lost to time? Before we get into this review, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit the hype button. I'm showing you right now what the hype button is right now. I'm thankful for Jehovah God and Jesus Christ for bringing each and every one of you to my channel, because I know that there's tons of people on YouTube you could be watching, but somehow you found my channel, and I know it's because of them. I'm grateful for each and every one of you for stopping by, and I hope you enjoy the review. Now let's get back into it. When you look at Prince of Persia, it might be difficult to know exactly what this game is. Sure, you could just say it's a puzzle platformer, but it actually has a pretty good hack and slash combat system. This is a game that I would say is one of the many of the 6th generation that pushed the idea of blending cinema and video games together. So you're not just getting a simple platformer with some time mechanics, you're actually getting something that feels like an interactive movie, but this is still the 6th generation, people, so this still plays like a game. You're still controlling the prince and doing everything yourself. The game is narrated by the prince, who, funny enough, is never named in this game. The story is told as if he's telling the story that you're about to experience, and not only is this cool because of the great reveal at the end, but it's a theme that's consistent throughout the game. The prince will narrate from the future, and he'll also have his own commentary during the present time. If you happen to die, the prince will speak as if he told the story incorrectly and try to start over. And sometimes the prince will actually go into great detail. Instead of just saying that didn't happen, he'll actually explain what should have happened. And that's like a secret way that the player can learn what they need to do if they keep failing. This feeds into the Prince of Persia feeling like a cinematic experience. But it's not just with narration. The camera here is amazing. Well, at least most of the time. The angles at which the prince will be jumping and hopping all over the place and fighting in battle looks good. But I will admit, there are moments where the camera will be blocked by something in the environment and you can't see anything. This mostly happened to me while I was in combat, and although you can control the camera in combat, the game goes into a distinct combat mode where the prince's movements and even the camera doesn't feel the same as when he's platforming, and sometimes it's hard to control. Outside of combat, anytime you're platforming, the camera is great. Wall running and taking leaps of faith feel amazing in this game, and that's thanks to the crazy camera angles that they'll put you in. Now remember, during this time period, the 6th generation, developers were still mastering analog camera controls. They really didn't have them down pat yet. And sometimes the developers focused on making cool looking camera angles and not so much focusing on the fact that the player may or may not know what to do next. There was one time where the prince is positioned. I didn't notice I could jump across to another pillar near the end of the game. That's one of those moments, but that's rare. But then there's other moments like this. I was in this sewer type level and there's these hidden areas you can go to, and I got stuck here until Jehovah God pointed out to me that the camera is trying to direct me to climb up this rope, which seems so obvious now, but in the moment, this didn't look that different than any other rope in the game that you're climbing in the same area, so I just didn't think to go up it. Speaking on climbing ropes, we might as well talk about platforming, as you'll be doing that mostly throughout your adventure. Now this is where the genius of Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time lies, because by no means would I ever say that the Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time is the greatest platformer ever. But what I will say is that this game might just be the greatest platforming game ever crafted. You might be saying, what's the difference between the two? To me, most platforming games have great levels, but then they have a few levels that are just kind of like going through the motions, and then, God forbid, some of them just might outright suck. Prince of Persia, on the other hand, is different. There is no bad level. There is no bad section. The game consistently adds new mechanics throughout the game, even to the end. It's as if these developers sat there and said, we want to make a game that has no filler, everything is consistently progressing, and we're going to keep giving you new things to do throughout the entire game until we just can't think of anything else. And once we reach our limit, we're just going to end the game. I know that's a novel concept for developers today, because most of them are trying to get so much out of your time, they'll fill the game with a bunch of fluff. And even back in the day, there were plenty of games that we could say that had missions or levels that were just filler. But this game is the only game I could think of in my 30 years of gaming that probably has zero filler to it. Every level is a hit level, especially when it comes to the platforming. The game starts off simple with you just running, jumping, and wall running. Then the game cleverly introduces traps and these semi-time trial moments. You see, there are these hallways with traps in it, and in order to open the door, you have to pull a lever and quickly get past the traps to get through the door. And you have to do it fast. So this is the developers testing you on the skills that they've already given you. So think about it like this. They teach you something, then they test you on it. And to test you on it, they make the game harder, which makes it feel like you're not doing just the same old because now you're being challenged by it. You were already challenged by it in the beginning because it was new to you, but now it's even more challenging now that the game is being harder on you. Most games will stop there and just increase the difficulty, but Prince of Persia does something different. It will then introduce a new mechanic, and none of these mechanics they introduce are like revolutionary or new to the platforming genre. That's why I'm saying that this is a well-crafted platformer, not something that's just going to be new to you. The Prince will gain the ability to wall bounce, move objects around to climb up on, swing from poles and pipes, which, by the way, is one of my favorite things in this game because you can see the physics of the Prince. He actually has weight when he's swinging from a pole. You can see how, like, depending upon the end of the pole you're on, if you're closer to where it's stuck to the wall, it doesn't bounce as much. But if you get to the end of the pole where it's sticking out from it, he'll bounce more on the pole. I just thought that detail was so cool, and I would love for games to do stuff like this again. And of course, you'll be swinging from ropes and balancing yourself on beams. Again, none of this is new to the platforming genre. In fact, Prince of Persia actually reminds me a lot of Tomb Raider because Lara Croft does a lot of these same things. I guess the biggest thing that makes the Prince of Persia stand out is the parkouring, the wall running, which is funny when you think about it because you would think it would be the time mechanic, but it's actually not used that often, but I'll explain that later. It's just something so satisfying about the wall running in this game. From a gameplay perspective, it's not complicated. You just simply go up to a wall at a slight angle and hold down the action button and he'll wall run across the wall. But it's the well-crafted animations that make it so fun to do. There are also going to be plenty of moments where while you're wall running, you'll need to jump off the wall and land onto another surface. And there are also some moments where simply wall running and holding down the button until the Prince naturally slows down won't get the job done. You'll have to time when to let go, causing him to slow down his wall run earlier than he would naturally. Like moments where you wall run over spikes that there's no way these spikes can hurt you if you simply just wall run over them. Like there's no challenge to it, but it just looks so cool. And this game does an excellent job at making you think the Prince is going to be in danger when you grab onto certain surfaces and then you see them crumble beside you. Really paints the illusion of danger, but you're going to be perfectly fine. And games like Assassin's Creed, which this game was based off of, and games like Uncharted really took those mechanics and really messed them up over the years. The reason why I say Assassin's Creed and Uncharted messed up this gimmick of making you feel like you're in danger when you're really not is because those games just feel so stiff in comparison to Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. I can't say that this game is on rails. They're just predetermined moments that will happen around the Prince, but this still feels like a platformer where you're in control of everything you're doing. Versus something like Assassin's Creed where there's just a dedicated hold down this button and you will do parkour and your character will just start bouncing all over the place and you don't feel like you have to do anything but just hold this button down. In Prince of Persia, you have to balance yourself on beams and you have to literally do that. You have to balance the analog stick or he will fall. In Assassin's Creed, when you walk on beams, your character will just stay on the beam. They will never fall off unless you make them do that by pressing other buttons. And Jehovah God just put something in my mind that if this game would have been remade, it's a high chance it wouldn't play like this. So it would probably play like a more modern day game where it's basically on rails and the character feels extra sticky to things. And that's actually one of the reasons why this game is so great is because it doesn't do that. It feels like you're in control because you are. And any mistake you make is your own doing. But the game has a cool mechanic so that if you do happen to make a mistake, you can actually reverse time. This is where the time mechanic comes in. Now, I said that the time mechanic really isn't that big of a deal in this game because it really isn't. It's more of a get out of jail free card. So if you're not losing or dying or falling or making mistakes, you won't really use it that often. If you happen to die, take damage, or just feel like redoing something, you can reverse time for a few seconds. Now, you can't just do this forever as you only have so many times you can reverse time. And even then, there's a timer on reversing time. So if you reverse time back to back and the timer didn't fill up again, then when you try to reverse time, you can only do it for a short period of time compared to the full length like normal. Throughout your adventure, you'll find sand that will increase your time gauge. You shouldn't need a guide to find the extra bits of sand throughout the game because anyone with the slightest bit of curiosity will explore the nooks and crannies in these maps. Remember, each stage isn't that big, so it's really not much of a place they can hide these. So if you simply just look around each corner, you'll end up finding some extra sand to increase your gauge. You can also slow time down. Now, to be fair, I don't think there's a moment where you need to use this. It's more of just a cool bonus feature. The game has these saw traps where I think most people will use them during these moments, but I don't think you actually have to. It's more of a buffer just in case you don't get the timing right. And even then, if you get hit during slow motion, you got to do the reverse to go backwards because you'll just fall to your death 9 times out of 10. It's so surprising that after all these years, I never realized that the Prince of Persia, the Sands of Time's main gimmick really isn't the highlight of the game. Don't get me wrong, it's a cool mechanic, but if you played any modern day racing game with a rewind feature when you crash into a wall or something, you basically experienced the gist of the time mechanic in Prince of Persia. Jehovah God reminded me of the puzzles, which I almost forgot about. One of my favorites is one of the earliest puzzles in the game and the one that actually sets up the traps throughout the entire adventure. The prince has to rotate and lift up these tubes of light that will end up setting off the security system in the palace. What's so cool about this puzzle is that the guard will give you tips if you're doing something wrong, or even let you know if you're doing something the correct way. The reason why this is so cool to me is because so many games today hold your hand, and technically the Prince of Persia throughout his adventure does hold your hand a bit. The game will use swooping camera angles to show where you need to go next. Every time you save, the prince will get a vision showing you the things that you'll be doing in the next few minutes. The game will guide you, but it won't baby you. So going back to this guard, even though he was telling me I was doing something wrong or even telling me I was doing something right, he didn't tell me what to do. He just was informing me that I was doing something the wrong way. And in the context of the story, it makes sense. The prince doesn't know how to activate this system, but the guard does, and he explained to you how to do it. So if you begin to do something outside of what he told you, he'll just lightly remind you that you're doing it wrong or pat you on the back when you're doing it right. There are also puzzles where you have to manipulate different objects. One of my favorite is near the end of the game where the prince has to rotate these different platforms to swing from these different poles to reach different sections of the level. There are also puzzles where you need to move mirrors around to manipulate beams of light. All of the puzzles in the game were challenging, but nothing frustrating, nothing something that you couldn't figure out on your own by just sitting there and thinking it over. Now, there were moments in the game that I did get stuck on a puzzle, but a lot of times that was due to me not paying attention. There's this maze-like puzzle where if you go through the wrong door, the room will reset. And although I was making progress by randomly selecting doors, Jehovah God had to point out to me that I'm supposed to be listening for the sound of water, which is the tell to let you know that you're going through the right door. Like I said, the game is great at subtly hinting things to you. Even with the platforming, Jehovah God pointed it out to me that this game strategically uses shadows to tell you when to jump off walls, which I do view as a puzzle solving mechanic. Without these shadows being placed on the wall, you might not know when to jump off of them to land on the pole correctly. And even with the light puzzles, there's markings on the ground to tell you where you could place the different mirrors, but you don't actually have to place them in those specific locations. There are also secret areas in the palace that will give the prince extra health if you find them. There's only one that I can think of that was off the beaten path, so most people should have full health by the end of the game. Now, there's another key feature to this game, which is more based upon the story, but it's still a nice addition. The prince has a companion throughout the game named Farah. She'll help the prince flip a couple switches and even do some fighting herself. Farah at times can also play as a guide, as sometimes she might suggest things to the prince, but again, this is a game from 2003, so don't expect her to just tell you the answer to anything. Every now and again, she may mention something to you, but if you get stuck, you either need to pray or just figure it out on your own. Having Farah along for the ride just made the adventure not feel so lonely. And even though the prince can do practically everything that she can, anytime there was a puzzle where they were working together, even though you don't control her yourself, it just felt like someone else was there with me, which was, I'm pretty sure, the point of adding her to the game. Sure, the prince could have flipped that switch that Farah did, but just like in life, things are better when you have someone with you. Farah also will be with you in combat, and that's what we're going to get to the other side of this game. The combat in Prince of Persia looks good, it even at times feels good, but it definitely has its fair share of issues. The camera issues aside, this game just lacks balance in its combat. Every enemy type has one move that you could do that will outright obliterate them. In the very beginning of the game, before you fight any sand monsters, you can easily just jump over human enemies and hit them from behind with your sword, and this practically will take them out every time. There's no strategy to defense in this game. Just hold down the block button and the prince will block everything. Now, oftentimes you will be getting jumped in this game, and it is nice that Prince of Persia has that mechanic that I think the 6th gen kind of started, where if you flick the analog stick while attacking an enemy, the prince will bounce around from enemy to enemy. It works fine in Prince of Persia, but I played other games with this mechanic and it's not the smoothest. Once you fight the sand enemies, there'll be 2 main types. It doesn't matter how they look. It all matters about what color they are. The red sand enemies can be hopped over. Once you hop over them, you can just hit them behind like you did the human enemies and they're pretty much dead. There are also these brute-like sand enemies that work the same way. You could just vault over them and the prince will do damage. Then you get to the blue type of enemies, which are tougher than the red ones. These guys hit harder, block more often, will counter, and just overall are a pain in the butt. That's until Jehovah God showed me how to fight them. You see, I mentioned that in this game, there's a mechanic where when you save, they will like show you a vision of what the prince will be doing in the future. And oftentimes they will show you fighting someone, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what they're showing you is something that you should do, or so I thought. When you're fighting the blue enemies, the best way to knock them out is to do this wall bounce attack where the prince will plant his feet against the wall and then lunge forward. If you do this, after they fall to the ground, you can then finish them off by sucking them up into your dagger. If you do not do this mechanic, you will be in for a rude awakening because again, you're getting jumped half the time in this game. And sure, fighting 1 or 2 enemies at a time is fine, but when you're fighting the toughest enemies in the game and they surround you from all angles and you can't vault over them because vaulting over these enemies, they'll just knock you straight down. And because there's no room, you can't roll past them, you're pretty much just screwed. And keep in mind, you have to suck up all the enemies. If you don't, they'll just revive, which plays into this game's difficulty in the combat because oftentimes you may be able to knock down some enemies, but because other enemies are blocking you from getting to the enemies you just knocked down, you can't suck them up. Now, I'm not trying to sit here and make it seem like the Sands of Time is some difficult game in its combat. It really isn't. It's actually pretty simple in the combat department. There are no combos. There are a few powerful moves that you can lock throughout the game, like one where the prince can instantly turn someone into sand by hitting them with a heavy attack. Like I already mentioned, you can vault over certain enemies and hit them from behind and they'll be in a defenseless state where you can suck them up. One of the best moves in the game allow you to slow down time and it turns each enemy into sand as you bounce from enemy to enemy. And as cool as this move is, it's not the best because it's kind of janky. The game spawns in enemies in small waves, so there's always going to be a moment where there's literally no enemies around, but your timer for this gauge is ticking down, and until they spawn in, you can't do anything here. Again, all these mechanics in the combat feel good, seem good, but it just feels like it's a prototype for something better. And also we gotta talk about Farah. Farah actually can help you out in combat by shooting bad guys with arrows. The only issue is that Farah can take damage not only from the enemies obviously, but you can actually hurt her yourself. So friendly fire is on, and that's not just for the prince and Farah. The bad guys can hit each other too, and you'll be surprised how many times this can actually save you. I think one of the funniest moments in the game is that when you first team up with Farah, the prince mentions that he wants Farah to like not get involved in combat because she might accidentally hit him with an arrow. I thought that was just something said in the dialogue. I actually got hit by an arrow from Farah. I actually got killed by Farah. And Farah will actually like apologetically scream out because she knows she hits you. Like that's just the level of detail this game has. I didn't mention reverse the time during combat, although you can do that if you need to. It's really no need to unless you take too much damage. The prince heals himself by drinking water, and you can't really do that during combat, even though water may be around in certain combat arenas. Like I said, this game kind of locks you into this combat mode, and it's hard to really get out of. And this is actually one of the biggest negatives of this game in this combat is that the prince has this auto lock on that you don't control with enemies. So let's say you're trying to reposition yourself to maybe run away and try to get some water, or you just want to reposition yourself because you want to fight a certain enemy. It's kind of difficult because the game is like trying to fight with you. You could feel it in the controls. The game is fighting against you from moving around too much. And there are some fights that start off in not the most convenient of places, especially when you're fighting the blue enemies, because like I said, you want to wall bounce attack them to do massive damage. And sometimes I was trying to get myself to a wall, but I could feel the game like trying to gravitate me towards the enemy and not just let me move around like I want to. That was one part I did not like about the combat, but it doesn't ruin anything. It's just more annoying than anything. Now, something Jehovah God reminded me of is how playing good in this game actually rewards you in the long run. That sounds like some generic nonsense, but let me explain to you what I mean. Remember, throughout the game, if you take damage, you'll lose health, and you only get health back by drinking water. Throughout the game, you may use the Sands of Time. You don't actually need to use the Sands of Time at any moment in this game that I could think of. Every time you use it, it's to reverse time because you made a mistake, or you just feel like slowing down time, which is an option, or you want to use one of your more powerful attacks during combat to make combat go by faster. You don't actually need to use any of it though. So why bring this up? I'm bringing this up because I'm showing you how this game had just this extra level of strategy that really made this game special to me. You see, the platforming challenges in this game aren't hard at all. In fact, if you're really good at the game, you could go through the whole game without taking any damage and never needing to reverse time. And if you do that, that allows you to go into every combat situation with a fully powered up Prince. And because you're not taking damage and reversing time, you're not losing sand and you're not losing health. What I love about Prince of Persia is how your decisions scale the difficulty. When I was playing poorly during the platforming segment and using up the Sands of Time, even though I could have technically just died reloading my save, I went ahead and wasted a lot of my sand. Not knowing around the corner was a combat situation where if I had my sand, I could have used some of the more powerful attacks early on instead of trying to build those gauges up mid-combat. There also might be situations where during the platforming segment, I misplaced the jump, but I didn't die, so I lost some health, and I didn't rewind time to get my health back. So that means when I go into the next section, which is combat, I'm starting with less health than I did before. Most of the time, there is a way to heal in each room, but most rooms with combat, as soon as you enter them, you'll be in combat mode. And although you can fight with the game, like I said, to kind of drink some water mid-combat, it's rarely ever possible. So that means that you need to play well when you're platforming to set you up for a better outcome when you're in combat. This is not like a mechanic they teach you. This is something you will just figure out on your own, or in my case, it's something that Jehovah pointed out to me because I was wondering why sometimes I would go into a room with max out health, max out sand, and he pointed out to me was because this time around I wasn't failing and sucking at the game in the level before it, which opened my eyes to that the better I play during platforming, I don't make mistakes, I don't reverse time, I'll have enough energy and health to go in and do maximum damage as soon as the fight starts. And it also works in reverse. Let's say you barely make it out of a platforming segment, and then the next thing you know, you're in combat. You know what that means? You're in a bad position because you barely have any health, you might not have enough sand, so that means you need to play very well during this combat segment or you're gonna die and have to reload a save. I thought this was a great example of an organic difficulty curve. It's solely based upon me performing good or bad, which determines how prepared I will be for the next segment. So I started the review out by talking about the remake that got canceled. The reason I'm mentioning this is because I'm playing the game from the GOG PC version. As this is my first time playing the game, I want to tell you my experience because there are people who are bummed out about the remake being canceled, but they still want to experience Prince of Persia, and outside of emulation or buying an old copy of this game for older systems, the only way you could play it just off of a modern day system is just buying it off a PC. My PC experience was typical. You will need to do light mods for this game for it to run up to standard. I didn't mod the graphics or anything. I just modded it to the point where it will function correctly. There are guys on the internet that will easily tell you exactly where to go to get the things you need, and none of it's shady and it all works pretty well. Just follow the instructions and you can figure it out. Like go to PC Gaming Wiki like I did, or even some content creators have made videos showing you exactly what you need to do. Outside of that little bit of work, how was the experience? Well, there are some issues here. For example, I played the game with controller support. The game has controller support, but it doesn't work in the menus. That's not that big of a deal. You just need to keep your keyboard next to you. The big problem is that even though you'll bind the controls, every time you start the game up and shut it down, even though it shows that the controller is bound, it's not. You have to rebind the keys every single time. Was that annoying? Sure, but the game is good. So it shouldn't exist. It should work, but the game is so good that I didn't care. Like, that's what I'm trying to say to you, which is a good thing. Now, one part that I don't know if it can be fixed is the audio. The audio overall is fine. You will be able to get the gist of the story, but I had to turn my TV all the way up because what happens is this game is supposed to do that thing where, like, if a character's off in the distance, their voice sounds lower compared to closer. All that's jacked up here. There are times where a character be right next to the prince and you don't hear barely anything they're saying. They could be far away and then they're loud as hell. You just won't really know. So I would advise you to turn your TV all the way up or your monitor all the way up or your speaker all the way up so you can hear things. But other than that, the PC version was fine. I ran into one bug where Farah didn't follow me and fell through the floor, but that was one time, reload the save. She didn't do it again. Non-issue in my opinion. Compared to the typical PC experience with older games, this is nothing. So I would actually say if you're someone that wants to play the Prince of Persia and you're not willing to hope for Ubisoft to eventually drop a remake, you can play the original Prince of Persia on PC, and this game is often on sale with all its other games for like less than 10 bucks. This game by itself is oftentimes $2. For $2, you could play a great game. But does this game have a great story? Now, like I said, this game came out in 2003. So it's going to seem ridiculous that I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but because I had no idea what this story was and I was blown away by it, I'm not going to spoil it for you. I'm just going to tell you that this game had a great story. The Prince of Persia, who does not have a name for some reason, goes on a mission with his father to India to take over this palace. The Indians were betrayed by the vizier of their own people. He wanted the dagger of time to become immortal, but when the prince found it before him, the prince's father told the vizier that he could get anything else out of the treasury except for the dagger. The vizier ends up tricking them to opening the Sands of Time, which they took back to the Sultan. Everyone gets turned into sand monsters, and it's up for the prince and Farah to set everything right. Throughout the story, the prince and Farah end up becoming love interests, and I felt it was a very natural progression for the two. I wish I could hear more of the dialogue that happens during gameplay, but once again, the PC version has jacked up audio. But from the gist of it, you get your typical, the prince thinks he has to be a manly man and tell her what to do, even though Farah is clearly a capable princess. Oh, by the way, she is the princess of the people that they just killed, so they kind of took her as a slave. But that plays into the game's story because the prince, although beginning to love Farah, wasn't so sure if she could be trusted, and that's thanks to the visions. Throughout the visions that he was having throughout the game, it seemed like Farah was going to betray him. But you'll only know what happens if you finally play the game, and that's where this review is going to end, with me telling you to play the game. Yeah, you thought I was going to spoil the story? No, I told you I wasn't going to do that. This game has an amazing story that you should experience for yourself, like I did. It's been 23 years since that game came out, and not only do I understand why people wanted a remake of this game, but this is one of the reasons why I won't spoil it for you, because you can go experience it for yourself. And with that, you should know exactly how I feel about this game. The Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time was an amazing game that I fully understand why everyone's disappointed why the remake got canceled, but at the same time, I'm just going to throw this out here. I got a strong feeling that they would have jacked up the remake and it wouldn't have been as good as the original anyway. Like, look at some of these character models. I'm sorry, but the original game's characters look way better than this. That's not nostalgia either, because I'm just playing it for the first time ever. Not only that, they probably would have modernized the game and told you every little thing you should be doing and not doing, and they probably would have made the combat be better. I'm not gonna lie, the combat probably would have been better in the remake. But other than that, I think that it would have been a worse experience because they would have babyfied it. It's modern day Ubisoft we're talking about. It would have just felt like a mod for Assassin's Creed. But my mini rant aside, the Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time is an amazing game that I'm so grateful that Jehovah God Jesus Christ allowed me to play and share my experience with each and every one of you. Let me know what you think about the Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time in the comments below. If you never played it before, will you be willing to play the original version since the remake apparently is canceled? Thanks for watching and God bless. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that hype button. I'm showing you where it is again on the screen right now. I pray that Jehovah God Jesus Christ blesses each and every one of you, and I hope you guys have a great day.